Wohlan, Reisende aus nah und fern, Hand und Herz in Gruß erhoben, der Pfeifer heißet euch in Hameln willkommen, well met, travelers from near and far. With hand and heart raised, the piper welcomes you to Hamlin town. I take it you're the right ones. Brave souls who wish to take a walk with the piper, an hour through Hamelin. Others have not survived. Many, many years ago, some children got lost on the tour, and I've had a fuss with the mayor ever since. And he tells me I ought to offer everyone a map of the town from the very beginning, so that you can find your way back. You will find a map of the town. There's the story of the piper, things to see and do, lots of useful information for one of the other days here in Hamelin. It's not enough. It's dangerous out there. Very, very dangerous. We could possibly get a sunburn, sunstroke, blisters on our feet, but the worst part of it is the town is full of tourists. They all want to take part on our tour. And then they stand in the front, they take pictures, they block the view and make a nuisance of themselves. Should sneaky stowaways try to get on board, show them your card and throw them out of the game. So if you're ready, so am I. It's the piper leads and everyone follows. Walk this way. Our path leads us through the municipal gardens, a green lung in the middle of Hamelin. And we have strange and spooky trees growing here. We have trees that are not indigenous to our region. We have a rose garden, an area of quiet sculptures, children's playground, oversized chessboard. We even have a playground for the retired, where you very rarely find the retired playing because they're jumping out of airplanes and riding bicycles. 200 years ago, it wasn't quite so idyllic, and 200 years ago, it was all a line of death around Hamelin, from the 4-lane road all the way out to the last tree. There were redoubts, there were palisades, there were moats and walls. Hamelin doesn't have a castle. Hamelin was a castle. And then Napoleon came in 1806. Napoleon was known as the victorious type. Hamelin was known as the Gibraltar of the North and not able to be taken by ground troops. And when the irresistible force meets the immovable object, only one can go forth. And the people of Hamelin gave up without a fight. The people of Hamelin gave up without a fight, and the French helped us tear down the fortress within 2 years. And at that point, we were able to expand. I neglected to mention there's a picture of it on page 4 of your lovely little and now wet pamphlet, which shows what the fortress looked like when Napoleon arrived here. And because it took 2 years to tear it all down, all of the historical items in Hamelin are gathered in the old town, and the items of significance around and about are less than 200 years old. Like, for example, the Tourist Information Office that you saw at the onset, a building in square and practical construction. It's a solar heated and cooled building, and it utilizes the energy of a single family dwelling, although it's so large. That, my friends, is the future. The recent past is out here like our congressional hall for groups of 5 to 500 people. We have the Hamelin Theater with the blue windows. For over 60 years now, we've had a theater in Hamelin, and for over 60 years now without our own ensemble. We pull in shows from everywhere, sometimes London, sometimes New York, most of the time a Detmold, little town down the road. And this gives us a high level of culture here in Hamelin. When we're talking about culture, there's the artist circle, famous house with changing displays at the moment, Papa Salus Vilar, with passion. All sorts of passion is to be seen here. And the people of Hamelin are passionate about their culture, and the big cultural highlight is, of course, here. Here on Wednesdays, here on Saturdays, here is the farmers' market. You're wondering what is cultural about the farmers' market. It's the gossip. The people of Hamelin meet early in the morning. They exchange a lot of information. They know everything, the grandmothers, and they don't have any internet. A little more culture lies around the corner. So, ladies, without one single gentleman in the group as an alibi, this is what we've come the long way to see, something that most of the tourists don't see. Half of the people have never seen the Pied Piper children's statue. It's an artwork by Karl Ulrich Nuss of Stuttgart, and it won the second prize in a contest about Piper artworks. You can see why. It's a little bit surrealistic. The children are floating in the air. They've got gigantic feet, and the water is kept in motion almost all of the time. Otherwise it reflects and you see it twice. Someone once said, art is that which inspires emotions, and everybody gets emotional about this piece, which means it must be wonderful artwork. At least that's what the city councilmen of yore tell us who bought it. The city councilmen of today don't have any money, but they meet here in the city hall to talk about it. And up there behind the panorama windows is where the Lord Mayor sits. And from here he rules our town of 60,000 people. Up on the top left you see the city crest of Hamelin, the Münster, the big church from down a lot. That's not rock and roll, that's Münster. We've been doing this for 1,200 years like that. And you see the millstones. Because we had the right to sell millstones, we had the milling courts, and because the millstones were here first, there's no piper in the city crest. The typical disrespectful treatment of the piper that I've been getting here for years. Yeah, you'd think that the people of Hamelin had seen the statue. No, when they're here for the farmer's market, it's all parked up with trucks and lorries and nobody can find it. And then they go into the city hall, and there's a rug there with the piper, and everyone, including the Lord Mayor, cleans his feet on it. This is where everyone says, "Oh." Ready? Oh. We have to get you up to speed, ladies. This disrespectful treatment has been going on for years. We're going on toward the Middle Ages. Come along. Hamelin is full of paradox. If Hamelin is anything at all, it's paradox. It's hot and cold and old and new and blue and green and all up against one another. You see it across the way in the form of a yellow house that is modern, but it looks old because it's got oriel bay windows involved in it, and towers and windows of various shapes. And so it appears to be a number of small buildings, and so it fits into the old city picture. On the other side are real small buildings that used to be a stall for horses and a barn, and it's been renovated over into a restaurant and guest rooms. And so you see an old house, a new house here adjacent to one another looks good. 200 years ago, you didn't see anything. Because 200 years ago, here where the trees are standing, is where the city wall went around with 22 big guard towers and 5 gates to enter and leave. But there was no gate here, there was no road here. These straightaway roads that you see again show us the full width of the fortress of Hamelin in one look. And out there on the big fortress, there used to be 1,500 soldiers working. whereby only 3,000 people lived in Hamelin, which means that every third person was a soldier in the old days. We go a little bit deeper into history this way. And when we're talking about Hamelin, we're talking about lovely little half-timbered houses all in a row, like number 20 here. And we had a lot of lovely little half-timbered, but these are lovely little half-timbered houses all in a row burn wonderfully, which is why they're not standing here anymore. We had a big fire a few hundred years back. 1/5 of all of the houses in Hamelin burned to the ground, which was quite sad. And the people of Hamelin had to move closer together. They let grass grow over the subject, and they noticed that the grass grew really good, because these burned up houses are like fertilizer. And so they utilized this area within the city walls for gardening. Don't know how much German language you're learning out there, but that's the word Gartenbauanlage, which is why the street is called the Baustraße. Later they went on to build big things. They built big things like the once major post office of Hamelin. They built big things like big hotels, but almost everywhere else you find lovely little half-timbered houses all in a row, like around the corner. Come along. Dear guests, Hamelin is full of paradox. If Hamelin is anything at all, it's paradox, you've heard. And the biggest paradox of all is the piper. And even little school children know that, little third graders. They write to me via internet, email, and Facebook, and they say, if you were such a powerful magician that you could lead the rats away and the children against their will, you could have played rock and roll for the mayor and gotten your money. You know I'm right. It's not about the rats, it's about the children. But the people of Hamelin are all confused, and they're all immune to paradox. They can't recognize it. It appears to me it's an inherited genetic defect, and it's been the cause of a lot of problems, like for the British poet Robert Browning. May I borrow that for a moment? The British poet Robert Browning, you've got one up on him. He never visited Hamelin, but he did have a map. And the one thing that he could read on his map is the word that's the same in English and French and German. It's West. The West Gate of Hamelin, the Westertor, or as the Germans say in Low German, Wettor, Wettorstraße. Now, what Robert Browning didn't know about the Hamelin paradox is that the West Gate of Hamelin is on the north side, which is why all of the directions in Robert Browning's poem are wrong. And when the British people are using Robert Browning's poem to find their way through Hamelin, they get lost. But they get lost in a European sense of thinking anyway, so which is nothing strange about that or paradox. But it is strange and paradox that the people of Hamelin love the rats and they hate the piper. It's a cult. It's an alternative religion. You'll see rats painted on the streets. There are rats painted on the walls. Big plastic rats in color stand around. And down along the river, there's an 8-meter-high stainless steel rat monument. In the bakeries, there are bread rats. You'll find licorice rats. There are chocolate-covered rats, pretzel rats, macaroon rats. You find marshmallow rats and sugar-coated rats, stuffed animal rats in every size and color. And on every blasted computer, there's a mouse. Unless, of course, it's a tablet. Have a look at this. This is madness. The people of Hamelin bake rats. The people of Hamelin eat the rats. And You've suddenly discovered you're in a madhouse, but you're not where you thought you were. You're not here with the Brothers Grimm, and you're not here in grandmother's rocking chair. This is CSI Hamelin. This is a detective story. This is the cold, cold case of the loss of 130 young people, and I invite you all to join me as detectives as we pull through Hameln looking for clues. Good detectives, they reinvestigate the scene of the crime, and that's what we want to do. The scene of the crime is in the center of the town under the church tower. Only one song can come now. It's a great song. It's a #1 hit from the year 1880, a song that you can still download out of the internet as a ringtone for your cellular telephone. This is the Pied Piper song. Dear friends, had you followed me through the arcade, you would have walked through and under a building, a half-timbered, Gothic half-timbered house from the year 1500. Gothic is horizontal lines of color and triangular supports that you see on the house. And you're looking at 1500. This one always blows the Americans' minds because this building was standing here 8 years after Columbus discovered America. They were all living in teepees over there in the old days, yeah? And we've got the houses. Now that's old, but that's not really old. Really old are things like the church. And this is where the story begins. The people of Hamelin are gathered in the market church on the 26th of June in 1284. You're right, that's tomorrow, the 26th of June. It will be 735 years ago exactly that a colorful man came to Hamelin with a flute in his hand. He went around the church and through the town, and he left going east with 130 young people. This part of the story is true. The business with the rats is a fairy tale. It's also true the church looked differently back then. The trained eye of the detective has already noticed that it used to be built like a big cross. The corners were added later, and you can see it quite readily on this piece over here with the old original stonework that's been standing here since the time of the piper, and it's still standing today. As they were building onto the church in all 4 directions, and after 1300, they put in a piper glass window. We have a date, we have a time, we have a place where it happened, and like any good detective story, we have witnesses. Eyewitnesses, like our Latin school teacher Samuel Erich, who told us precisely where the glass window was. He said it was where that is around the corner. We're going around the corner. Come this way. Look, they're planting rats in pots. I take it you are learning German out there? Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. The real answer is jawohl. You want to try that one on? Jawohl. Okay, that's medium enthusiastic. I may get you up to speed yet. And learning German, what you're hearing from Latin school teacher Samuel Erich is Old German, Low German, the way they used to speak 200 years ago. And that means the big glass window behind me. The biggest glass window in the entire church. And suddenly you notice how important I used to be. I was larger than life. Like King Kong and Godzilla all at once. And in front of me, there were a lot of smaller figures in the picture. At the bottom of it, it was blue. And this is where water gets involved in our story. Like in the book Knaben Wunderhorn, you read that the children were drowned in the river. And historian Hans Dobertin says that the young people walked for 4 weeks across the Uckermark, north of Berlin, all the way out to the Baltic Sea, where they sailed out at Johanniterhof and Cheshire-Kopan and then went down, just like Titanic. And that's the difference between me and fairy tales. You know how fairy tales go. Fairy tales are, up on the mountain there was a castle, and the beautiful daughter of the king lived there. A hero with a white horse came and rode off with her into the sunset. And if they haven't passed away, then they live happily ever. Everybody dies in my story. That's why I'm not a fairy tale. It's also true, our glass window doesn't exist here anymore. You may have noticed it got lost in the middle of the 30 Years' War of Succession. And in the big long War of Succession, Hamelin was surrounded by the Swedish army for a whole year. And the people of Hamelin were afraid, and they took valuables out of the town and glass windows out of the market church. They carried the things off when it was dark and foggy, off to Braunschweig, off to Lüneburg, where the things were to be kept safe. The things were so safe there, we never got them back. Which is why we needed a new glass window. And it was installed at the 700th anniversary of the tale, here in the alleyway, where no tourist finds it on his own, in the typical disrespectful treatment of the piper. You've heard? Yeah, now come along. The church was built like a big cross, and the corners were added later. And once again, you see that old original stonework, roughly hewn stones, about 2 meters thick. It gets smaller as it goes up, and in the center of it, in that Romanic half-round window, you find the piper glass window. It's an artwork by a man named Klaus Zimmer. And just like the old original glass window, it shows a lot of colors, it shows a lot of children, but there are no rats, because the rats are a fairy tale. It's also true the church hated me. They hate me up until this very day. And it doesn't take long. I'm standing here doing my guided tour. They turn the damn bells on and no one can hear me. And then, around that big glass window, they used to have a big long warning, don't follow the piper or you will rot in hell. But it gets worse. The church used to be the government. There was no elected government, there was only the church. The kings were in the church, and the dukes and the aristocrats, and little girls didn't go to school, only little boys. And then only the little boys of aristocracy. Mr. Fun this and Mr. Tsu that. And the Funs and the Tsus, they had a monopoly on education and information. They didn't want anyone else to have any, otherwise everyone would notice they were just as stupid as everyone else. But they continued their education at universities, and they come back as theologians, as the learned in the subject of faith and religion. And the theologians of this time period, here in the repository of intelligence and education, they write big, thick books that you can still read in the Hamelin Museum today. And in the big, thick books, it says, I am the devil incarnate. Which is why we leave the church and go this way. So, the very symbolic center of Hameln, the middle border stone of the city, and walking the borders is an important bit of business. And like everything we do in the Middle Ages, it's done at a certain time of the year, and that certain time of the year is dictated by the sun. And so, at the equinox, in September, when the day is exactly the same length as the night, the gray eminences of Hameln meet out here on the mountain at the gallows that were about 350 meters down that way on a mountain that was about 1.5 meters high. And they made a lot of decisions, and they sent the youth of Hameln out and the men who were old enough to fight to check the borders of Hameln. There are like 75 kilometers of border around Hameln. Hameln is a Hanseatic city. Hameln is an authority unto itself, and the militia is to go out and check the borders. But of course, that's a lot of work to do, even in September. And so they're not really enthusiastic. A little bit like you guys. And we needed to motivate them, to get them going, right? And so the wise men of Hameln, the gray eminences, they said, if you go out and check the borders, when you get out there, there's a big dinner and free beer. And suddenly everybody was happy, and they went out and checked the borders and had their free beer, and it was a great fun. Yeah. And this party, this thing has been going on for years, but it's moved now to the last Saturday in September. And the youth that used to do the tour is almost, there they go again. I told you they do it. And the youth of those days has gotten quite a bit older, and we're wondering that they're not going with Zimmers out around the borders. But the big change is now there is alcohol from the very beginning. Hey. And so they're even better motivated than they used to be. When they come back from the border, normally by then they're almost crawling, and toddling back and forth, and then they get back here in the afternoon. They come back and they touch the center stone, and they say the famous phrase, this is your chance. Yeah, you're getting there. Yeah. This is German, my friends. This is Alles Use. Would you like to try that one on? Alles Use. Hey, that's great. That's Low German. That's Plattdeutsch. That's the way the people of Hameln used to speak 200 years ago, as I say, and it means alles unsers. Yeah, it belongs to us. Alles Use. And when they cheer, the famous cheer that you say 3 times is hip hip horido, hip hip horido. I don't know if that means anything, but it sounds like fun when a lot of people say it all at once. You can try later when nobody's looking. Okay. Dear friends, and here, the very center of Hameln is where we do our Pied Piper play on Sundays. And when you're here on Sundays, there are 80 actors on the stage, 30 rats, the evil mayor, just the way you might expect. Out there, you don't see any cobblestones anymore, but a sea of heads, and 3,000 or 5,000 people are looking, depending upon the weather. And that's been going on now for over 60 years. For over 20 years, we've been doing a musical on Wednesdays, 2 shows a week, almost 20 weeks a year. You would think that would be enough rats for the people of Hamelin, but no, the people of Hamelin need their daily rat. You're not surprised? And they get their daily rat up here in the form of 37 bells that play music 5 times a day. And in the afternoon, the doors open and the piper comes out and chases the rats and children around just the way you might expect. And you'll have to expect it because the next time the figures work is at 1 p.m. if you're still in Hamelin. The times are in your lovely little pamphlet on page 14. And on any given day that God allows to exist, this machine is working, and unless, of course, it's not working. And it's been that way since 1964. So a lovely old piece of machinery. If you could find an automobile from 1964 that's still running and park adjacent to it, then we'd have the right picture, I guess. Dear friends, the bells are hanging on the side of the Hochzeitshaus, a festival hall for high times. And the people of Hamelin hang on their Hochzeitshaus as well. And when they're hanging around here. And when they're doing festivals in the city, it's always right here. The people are emotionally attached to their Hochzeitshaus. And perhaps I can explain to you why. Come around the corner. Der wunderliche Mann. That's me. And this turn of a phrase comes from no less than the brothers Jacob and William Grimm, who put out their book German Legends some 202 years ago. And the wunderliche Mann is also our selfie picture here in Hamelin. You lay on your back adjacent to the wunderliche Mann and you take a picture from top to bottom, take the text along with it and post it on the Facebook page or as a hashtag on any given system you like as wunderlicher Mann, and you are intensely invited to join me. Laying on my back here with other people, people from film and television and everyone. Ah, the bells play and they're playing my song. And they're playing my song now for a reason. Because it is not only the 26th of June in 1284, tomorrow in 735 years ago, but also the 5th hour of the day that the piper leaves Hamelin. You're looking skeptical. The 5th hour of the day, dear friends. In the Middle Ages, we only had sundials. Up there is one of them. And the 5th sunny hour of the day is for you modern people 11 o'clock. Got it? Yeah. So we have a date, we have a time, we have a place where it happened. Witnesses, it's all a big detective story. And the bells play my song in the 5th hour of the day. This is the time that the piper left Hamelin. But he was seen by an eyewitness. And you don't notice it right away. But I can tell you how. We're talking about this building, the heart of Hamelin, the thing the people of Hamelin really think is incredibly important. Yeah? And this building is Renaissance architecture. Renaissance is that time period around Leonardo da Vinci, Galileo, Christopher Columbus, Martin Luther. And the people of Hamelin have money to burn, but there's no Mercedes-Benz automobiles and cellular telephone, and so they build houses. And when they're finished building their houses, they throw their money together to build the Hochzeitshaus, a festival hall for high times. And the Hochzeitshaus is the holy number 3 involved here. You know about the Father and the Son and the Holy Ghost, and the Germans say all good things come in threes, and a table with 3 legs remains standing. A ladder only has 2 and it falls over without a wall. Which is why there are 3 entranceways. You see the city scales, the city apothecary, and the city wine shop. You see lines of 3s going through the building that are ledges or cut stones. You see 3 diagonal houses on the roof, Zwerchhäuser, Querhäuser, that accentuate the doors, and the doorways are also accentuated by a carved in stone inscription above each and every doorway. And now, finally, the hobby detective who has seen all 778 episodes of CSI knows exactly what paradox and anomaly I'm talking about here. You missed out one on CSI Houston, didn't you? There are 3 entranceways, but there are 4 inscriptions. And if 3 is a holy number, 4 can only be an unholy number, and that's the way it is in Japan and China, where the number 4 is death. Number 4, death, right? You're not from Japan and China. Okay, he can't answer that question. Yeah. And so, if it means death, and there's no door there, because the mountain has closed over our children, this is exactly what we wanted to investigate. We need to have a look at this. Carved in stone, it's a version of the eyewitness account about the piper. Our eyewitness was a little girl, and little girls didn't go to school, which is why her eyewitness account was taken down in the church book in Latin and in rhyme. They made a rhyme out of it so that the information was stable, and because it's a rhyme, you can recite it without loss of information. All of the great stories of antiquity are in rhyme. Ilias, the Trojan War, the trips of Odysseus, the tales of Robin Hood, and the songs of the Beatles are all in rhyme. And that is why you can recite them without loss of information years and years later. And the most important part is, because it's a rhyme, it's very close to the original information, which means we're at that point in the drama where you get an informant. And when you get an informant, you suddenly get new aspects on the crime. Huh? And these new aspects on the crime, my dear guests, in the German language read, nach Christi Geburt 1284 Jahr gingen bei den Koppen unter fürwahr 130 Kinder in Hameln geboren, von einem Pfeifer verführt und verloren. You've been learning German long enough, right? You know what Mark Twain, the famous American writer, said about the German, may I help you? Said about the German language. He said, a German dives into the beginning of his sentence and he swims underwater for a long, long time, and then he comes out at the end with a fish in his mouth. That's the verb. Now, and so you have to wait a long, long time to find out what really happened, and the important part of this is the verb, and the verb in this case is the third word from last. Don't know if you took that, you were awake in school on that day. The important word here is Verführung. Now, that means we're not talking about a children's crusade. We're not talking about a ship going down. We're not talking about a bridge crashing and taking the children with it. We're not talking about the Black Plague or theories about them building new villages in Mähren and Pommern and Uckermark and Siebenbürgen. We're not talking about Sydenham's chorea, a disease that causes you to dance and shake. No, my friends, we're talking about Verführung. Huh? Did you miss school that day? Seduction. And suddenly it's a whole lot more interesting than it was before, right? Ah, come along. Now, if my story is historical, and of course historians have worked on it, Some 16 different historians have worked on the Piper tale. 5 of them are professors. 2 others have written their doctorate on the Piper. And the historians, they don't talk about seduction. I have heard they sometimes seduce their students, but they don't talk about it. What they do is they tell us that the young people used to live on this side of the town, full of lovely little half-timbered houses all the way over to the other city wall. And they say the young people left the town of their own free will for the same reason as today. There's nothing going on back there. And it's been that way for hundreds of years. Since the people of Hamelin had their little village of 3 streets, and they built a thoroughfare around their little village. And this thoroughfare you modern people see as the pedestrian area. What for you appears to be the middle used to be a round and about. And as soon as you build a round and about, it doesn't take long before McDonald's and Tesco and Safeway and all of the others arrive. And in this case, it is the merchants all move over here, and the craftsmen are bored to death. There's no business. They're looking for entertainment, and they find their wives. And because there's no television, they have a lot of children. They have 6 children. They have 8 children in the family. But only the first son can inherit father's business. Only the first daughter will get a dowry and be able to marry, and the others have no future. And so, according to the historians, the piper comes to stand and speak. We've just won some ground back from the Danes up along the Baltic Sea. Pommern, Vorpommern is available for colonization. We can go there. We can marry. We can work father's trade, build houses, have children, and be free men. And being a free man is an important right in the Middle Ages. Not everyone was. If we believe the historians, here in these side streets, 130 teenagers of a marrying age. People like you. You could marry at 14 in the Middle Ages. They get up off of the couch and they let their cellular telephone fall to the ground. They reach for provisions. They reach for tools. They load covered wagons and coaches and dog-drawn carts. And they go in a long and dusty trek through the side streets of Hamelin all the way out to the east gate. We'll take the shortcut, and that goes this way. And we've arrived at the repository of intelligence and education here in modern Hamelin, our museums complex. 2 buildings here in the middle of the pedestrian area that are a little bit paradox. You can see one of them is half timber, the other one is made of stone. When something's paradox, it has to do with the piper. And of course, this does. You can see the story of the city of Hamelin from the gray of antiquity here over 7 different levels that you can reach with a wheelchair all the way up until the day before yesterday, and that in 2 languages, Deutsch and lingua franca, English. And so there's enough to see and read in there, but out here you notice you don't read anything. The people of those days didn't read or couldn't read, and so there's nothing written. What you see is symbolic. And symbolically, you see here 2 different schools of thought. On the one side, it's pride, and on the other side, it's fear. And what's the man afraid of? He's afraid of the piper. You've heard the story. The church, the authorities, the government is telling a different story about the piper, one you may never have heard, that says the devil incarnate walked the side streets of Hamelin, leading 130 young people away to the mountain. The married women of Hamelin followed, and up on the mountain, one or the other of them bumps into the piper where he says, I've led 130 away, and I'm coming back in 300 years to get even more. But the people of Hamelin are no fighters. The people of Hamelin are merchants. They're insurance salesmen and boring bureaucrats. And when they're faced with the return of the devil incarnate, they start to write it down. And they write it down in the church books, they write it down in the documents, and suddenly we have the year 1558. And everyone in Hamelin knows, just like this chap, the piper is coming back. within our lifetime. That's going to be pain, that's going to be pestilence and death and a whole lot of ouch. And he doesn't want that. And so he builds his house like this. It's an alarm system of the late Middle Ages. What you see here? Hallo! Na, wo kommt ihr gewesen? Ah, schön. War das schön? Okay. Also the testers were there, the museum is good. Yeah?
All right.
Yeah. And so, what you see here, this alarm system of the late Middle Ages, 2 rows of people out of the Bible. Up under the roof, there are planetary gods or astrological signs to be seen, and on all of the beams that rise out of the house are ugly faces to keep the evil spirits away. You could have told the people of Hamelin anything you wanted to, and this is the time period where the rat tale began. But first, our story, our man is finished, and he thinks he's safe. And because he thinks he's safe, he decides to throw a roof-raising ceremony, and he invites all of the craftsmen in who have worked on his house, and he's drinking beer out of a big mug, and the wood carvers don't have an iPod 10 cellular telephone to take his picture, and so they carve him out, and you find the man at the top right-hand corner drinking beer. This is Mr. Poppendiek, the man who built the house. How many people do you know with their own visage on the facade of the house? Not too many. Poppendiek could get away with this. He was a rich man. He was an influential man. Mr. Poppendiek was the mayor of Hamelin, but he was scared to death of the piper. And he says, I and my family will survive. The rest of you can die. And this is when the people of Hamelin get a lot of help from far, far away. Down along Lake Constance on the Swiss border. And there's a chap running around there by the name of Graf Froben von Simmern, Count Froben. And because his name is von Simmern, that means he can read and write. And that's what he's doing. He's writing a travelogue, and he's in the year 1551 in Meeskirch on the Lake Constance, and there he documents a plague of rats. And he writes it all down about the rats, and he writes all the anecdotes about rats, and after the comma he says, so long as I'm on the rat material, this reminds me of a story I've heard about this chap who first leads the rats away and then the children. This is where the madness begins. And it doesn't take long before the people of Hamelin have 2 hearts beating in their chest. On the one side it's, the piper is coming back, we're all going to die. And on the other side it's, maybe he's a street musician. Maybe he's a jester. Maybe he's an exterminator who likes to wear fancy clothing. In any case, we're not afraid of these people, not at all. 1584 comes, 1584 goes, and the piper does not come back. The people of Hamelin take a lot of money from their bank accounts and build fancy houses like Mr. Leist, and the closer you get, the more you see. Come this way. Mr. Leist has a lot of humanism here on his house. The human is important. There are Greek columns rising up, and the virtues of the common people on the frieze, and the obelisks rise out of the roof like the fingers on your hand, as if the human's trying to grasp God. And you see there's a big change of paradigm here. 300 years long. The Catholic dogma is preaching down from the council, the piper is coming back, the piper is coming back. And they can't deliver their Armageddon, which is why they're washed up. The Lutheran faith takes over. The human is no longer worthless like he was in the Middle Ages, but he moves to the very center of the universe where he's still standing today. And all of these changes here in Hamelin are catalyzed by the piper. Like any catalyst, at the end of the reaction, I'm still standing there and wondering what happened. Because for 300 years I was big, I was colorful, and I was evil, and all at once they changed me over into a fairy tale man. And since then they've been chasing me here through Hamelin with their damned rats. They have these dreadfully expensive copper rat plates mounted everywhere in the town, and on every corner there's some grandmother on a cane saying, "Where are the rats?" And to top it all off, at the bitter end of it, they even have a statue here for someone who never existed. Come along. Yes, ladies, I had warned you there are bread rats to be purchased in Hamelin. They're as hard as a rock. You can't eat them. If you have a German Shepherd, he'll get through that. But we do have cookie rats, if you wish, and the stuffed animal rats in all sizes and colors. The people of Hamelin even have rat filet in the can. The people of Hamelin are traumatized by the rats, and it's all about that man over there. It's the man you've been waiting for. It's the fairy tale man. It's the magical man. It's the man who never really existed, the Pied Piper. And as if he's leapt out of a children's book, you find him here. And he's playing his music, and the rats are coming out of all of the holes, and they're following him down toward the river in a tale of madness that can be destroyed by one logical sentence of 3 words. The 3 words are, rats can swim. And because rats can swim, this story doesn't work. And if this story doesn't work, we ask ourselves, do the other stories work? Do young people leave home at the drop of a hat, loading all of the cladderadatch and going off without saying goodbye, nobody notices, and organized all by themselves? Come along. Just imagine you're standing there in Hamelin with all your teeth in your mouth, and suddenly this chap comes by and says, hey, we're going to walk to Pakistan and build a dam with our hands. And you leap up and say, I've always wanted to do that. And 129 behind you say, take me too. Sure they do. Yeah? Young people don't do that. You know better than I do, young people don't do that. When young people gather together really fast, there's one magical phrase that always works. It's, want to have a party? Ah, the smiles appear everywhere. And that's what we're talking about here. It's the middle of the summer. It's one of the longest days of the year. And on the longest days of the year, in the middle of the summer, when it's really warm, young people start wearing less clothing. Unless they're teachers, they still have sweaters on. And when young people start wearing less clothing, they come up with good ideas. Or maybe bad ones. The only people who are wearing long gowns all the way to the ground are the ones that are in the church, and they're singing their Gregorian chants. It's, and they're wearing beige and brown and black and gray, and suddenly out here where it's warm and going down, this colorful man arrives. And all of the people look. Nobody's dressed that colorful. And he's a musician. And he's playing entirely new music. Young people love entirely new music. He's a stranger. And he speaks with a strange dialect that sounds good in your ear, that makes him interesting. And on top of all of this, according to one or the other of the stories, he was good looking. A combination like Justin Bieber, Elvis Presley, and Lady Gaga all at once. And the young people of Hamelin were fascinated. The young people of Hamelin were enthusiastic, and the young people of Hamelin said, I want to be colorful too. But it has to go fast, because the old-timers are singing the second verse of Gregorian already, and the young people can't hear it anymore. They reach into the strawberries. They reach into the cherries that are fresh this time of year, and they paint themselves up in color. It doesn't take but a second. They're in the cellar where they find wine in bags, mead, and the dried mushrooms for medicinal purposes. And 130 young people gather together and walk out of the town behind the piper past a little girl who's never been a day of school in her life. They're singing, they're dancing, they're under the influence of alcohol and medicines, and they look like they're covered with blood. And the little girl went nuts. She was traumatized. She's standing there just not taking it in at all. So, and she goes down in history as the deaf and dumbstruck girl. By the time she's able to put down her eyewitness account, the piper and his party people have disappeared over the mountain. But something goes wrong up on the mountain, and none of them come back. It was like Woodstock or the love parade of all time, maybe the first. Dear friends, it was bad and it was fun. And of course, being bad is fun. Consider that a while. Yeah. But since you've been on the long and dangerous tour of the Piper and you have survived, you, of course, get a memory, and your memory is my card. And you can't get this anywhere. You have to earn it on the tour with the Piper. In the Middle Ages, we used to say, "Fare thee well, and may no evil pass your way."